This episode is sponsored by Dirty Coast, a New Orleans-based t-shirt company run by locals. Dirty Coast is a tourist destination and a local favorite. Their shirts are secret handshakes, game day standards, and Mardi Gras uniforms. They venerate icons, promote causes, and celebrate NOLA's way of life. When you truly love something, you share it with as many people as you can. So whether you're a charity baby, a transplant, or simply passing through, Dirty Coast helps you be a New Orleanian wherever you are. Shop in-store or online by visiting www.dirtycoast.com. Trigger warning. This episode contains discussions about suicide ideations, which may be triggering to some listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your mental well-being and seek support if you find this content distressing. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to a trusted individual or a mental health professional for assistance. You are not alone, and help is available. Enjoy the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Self-Aware Millennial. I am your host, J.Mix, and I hope that everyone is taking care of themselves. It's been a really interesting couple of weeks that even I haven't had a full chance to process because there's just a lot to process. But in the meantime, thankfully for this episode, we're going to be talking about medication and therapy and our experiences with it and how, at least in my life, I know I've not diverted from it, but I haven't had to utilize it nearly as much because I've used it so much that you get to a point where you don't need it as much. So I have Asia-Lyn with me, and we're going to be talking about that. But first, I want to give y'all a couple of announcements to keep y'all in the mix with the Self-Aware Millennial, because there's been a lot that has happened over the last couple of weeks since y'all have last listened to, or I should say, the last episode. I'm actually not exactly sure where this episode is going to land, but we will figure it out. So if you didn't listen to the last episode, the Self-Aware Millennial Live is now available on Patreon. We have the first two episodes with Whitney and Dylan Tran that are now available. People that are already a part of Patreon, if you are a $5 patron or up, you can watch it right now without having to pay anything. If you want to just watch the live show and you're not a patron, it'll be $10. Or you could just become a $5 patron and watch it for $5. So those are the hacks. Those are the hacks. Also, if you're listening to this, that means that we're not at Halloween just yet. So October 31st, I will be performing in burlesque. Yeah, y'all, in burlesque. It's produced by Nikki, and Nikki is doing every single month a burlesque version of a musical within the New Orleans area. And this month is October, and they're doing Little Shop of Horrors. I will be playing one of the doo-wop girls that y'all know and love, but obviously it's in burlesque, so it's going to be a little bit more interesting. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so y'all should definitely check that out. The links to the tickets will be in the bio. And yes, I am nervous, but I'm excited because I also have done other burlesque shows before, just as a singer. I remember just everybody being so welcoming, so just giving. They love to give. They love to give money and dollars, and I'm just not used to that. I'm used to the very, I don't know, hoity-toity crowds that have already paid all their money to a box office of some sort, and they don't throw you any money because they've already thrown all their money to the box office. So I get to actually see that in real time and feel it in real time, and I love burlesque. Y'all should definitely check it out. The next thing I want to let y'all know is I'll be performing again about a month later, early December, like the first weekend. I'll be singing with the LPO, the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra, for their holiday extravaganza with Mark Anthony Thomas. Mark Anthony and I go way back to Loyola, and now Mark Anthony also sings with Tank and the Bangas right now. I'm really proud of him. I'm really excited to be singing with him. We're going to be doing some solos and some duets with a really large orchestra. I just did a show with them this past weekend. It was Get Out, the movie Get Out with Jordan Peele. We did a live music version of it. So they stripped all of the music in the movie, and it was like the orchestra and the singers were that live music experience for the audience. So how did I get on that? Oh, right, LPO. That was my first experience with LPO, working with them, and it was really fun. And I'm excited to come back as a soloist in December. I will also link the tickets to that as well for y'all if you want to check it out. I know those are two completely contrasting shows, but hey, whatever pays the bills, right? And then the last thing I wanted to make a quick announcement about, because as of late, these last couple of weeks, I've been finding my New Orleans podcaster tribe. Not that they weren't out there before or even 3 years ago, but we were all sporadic and I didn't necessarily know everybody. I don't even think we didn't have as many podcasters back then. But now I've been finding podcasters that I know, that I've like just interacted with, and not realizing that people that I knew already had podcasts. So we've been collaborating and becoming more invested with each other to just pick each other up, give each other tips, and find ways of collaborating with each other. So I'm going to, for the next couple of episodes, just give a local podcaster shout out. The first podcast shout out I want to give it up to is Planet NOLA. Planet NOLA just started their podcast a little over a year ago, back in 2022. It is hosted by Mary Jacobs. Mary Jacobs and I go way back to my first musical that I've ever done back in 2007. We actually did a show together called The Dream on Royal Street, which is like the New Orleans version of Midsummer Night's Dream. And Alan Menken wrote it, and it was a really interesting first play that I've ever done, but that's beside the point. Mary Jacobs, she's a very talented person. She's a comedian. I mean, she's running a business with her wife of, I think it's called Vitality Fitness. They are a really powerful pair together, and just seeing how they move and just build each other up with their community has been really inspirational for myself. And they just had their first live show at Big Couch NOLA in New Orleans, which is a newer event space for comedians and other live acts. I went into that space and I was absolutely blown away. It's not huge, but it's very intimate, and it was a perfect space for their live show. So shout out to Mary Jacobs and Planet NOLA. We will definitely get Mary on this show very soon. We've already talked about it, but we're both busy people and it's going to come when we have the time. Okay, everybody. So now we're going to talk about, well, actually, we're not going to talk about it just yet. We're going to introduce our guest for tonight's episode, or today's episode, whenever you are listening to this, Asia-Lyn James. And I will say that I met Asia a couple of years ago when I think we were both working at a local restaurant in New Orleans. And I remember Asia just being very wonderful and assertive in their needs for what they needed in the position that they were in within the company that we were working for. And I was just like, oh, that's inspirational. So I think that's the main thing I remember about you, other than being just a really cool and sweet person. So I'm really happy to have you. I'm really excited for us to talk about everything we're about to talk about. And I don't want to give everything away. And I know that within this conversation, you have a lot that you've experienced, just even within like when we last saw each other in person versus now. And so I would love to hear more about your journey through therapy, through medication. But first, I want to know more about what you do now. And I feel like I could just give your whole life story, but we don't have to do all that. Maybe the first thing I want to have you let everyone know within the audience, let the audience know, is, how are you feeling?
That's always the question, right?
Yeah.
How are we doing? First of all, thank you so much for asking me to do this. I've been following your podcast since I think you started. I always felt like we hit it off when we were working together. You're also a Sagittarius, right?
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
I
That's
am.
where it is. We know how to find each other in any space. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. How am I doing? I am doing actually much better than I think I ever have, to answer that completely honest. I've been on, like you said, a long journey of figuring out mental health and what works for me. And I would say this season of my life, I feel most in touch with myself. And also, I have more tools to navigate difficult things that I don't think I really had access to before. And so I'm feeling pretty good.
Good. I can always tell when people are doing better than they have before. I feel like there's just like this lightness to them. Lightness may not be a word or the best word to explain that, but I think just in terms of being able to just reflect on how far you like I can feel that reflection before you even give me any information about what it was because it's in the past, but it's still obviously influencing you now. If you feel comfortable, I would like to first off give the audience some more information about what your current profession is and like where you were before. Is that the cat? That was the cat. Sorry. I only saw like the last bit and I thought it was a rat.
Well, you're in New Orleans, so
Yeah.
it's a toss up.
So, yeah, let's take us on your journey with your current profession, or let's just say, see, going at it through so many different layers is really that can be hard. I'm trying to find the easiest way to get into it because since we are talking about medication and therapy and how I feel like we're both probably in a place now where we don't need as much of it as we need to know not necessarily how you're feeling now, but where you were that made you get to the place that you are now. So, if you feel comfortable talking about your past, and then we will
Yeah,
move our way to the present.
definitely. Yeah. So just my background with mental health, just want to do like that umbrella,
I have
the
a
direction.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
the question that can dive us into. What made you want to go to therapy? What made you say, "Okay, it's time"?
So I was 18 and I was having panic attacks pretty much every day. I didn't know I had been having panic attacks since I was very small, but I think by the time I had language for it at 18, I was just concerned and also felt debilitated. So I would say I was debilitated by anxiety when I was 18. So that had me start looking at therapy as an option. And from there, it's been this journey of being in and out of therapy. I'm 30 now, and being in and out of therapy for that amount of time, trying different medications. And I think I just felt like there's got to be a way to stabilize, to start feeling like myself, because I just felt so disconnected from myself. And so
May I ask when did you ever feel yourself hooked before you got on medication or went to therapy? Can you remember a time that you felt that way?
anxious, the time that I felt like anxious.
Because you said you hadn't felt like yourself. And at least for me, I know that there was a point, at least within my childhood. And I mean, I was in survival mode for most of my childhood. So I didn't really realize it. But there was still parts of me that was like, oh, this is more of me. This is who I am. But I can't be fully who I am now. I'm not in
Mm,
that space.
mhm.
But like already having an understanding of it and realizing that you still have work to do to create the environment so that you can be your whole self. So pre-therapy, was there any indicators within your life, like things that you now know about yourself that you have carried into the current present parts of yourself that you still hold true that you knew about yourself pre-therapy, pre-medication?
Oh, definitely. I think the first one that comes to mind is the fact that I knew I was deeply intuitive and very much in touch with my surroundings at all times, which almost made the anxiety worse, right? Because you're like
Yeah.
hyper vigilant, really aware of power dynamics. You can walk into a room and you're just like, oh, like this isn't for me, or oh, I feel good here. And I feel like that's a strength that I've had that I knew was there. before I went on my therapy journey. And just this creative, very just in tune, like part of me that I was in touch with at certain points before I started therapy.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
And that was something you said you've known even like when you were a child. Like that was just something
Yeah.
that you just a response of any sort of traumatic events that you've had within your childhood. That's just like a naturally who you are. Ooh.
Yeah. Of course, certain aspects of trauma impact that, right? But
Yeah.
I would say at my core, there's definitely an intuitiveness there, an awareness there that I think was just like unique to even my creative self as a kid, which led me to want to write or read or create like little plays or short stories or write music. I always was like creating something from that place. So
Yeah.
very much a part of me. Definitely.
Awesome. So, okay. You sound very much like me. It's in the ways of like how you cope or how you're able to just manifest yourself and who you are versus the elements of your life that you can't control.
Hmm.
So, you were mentioning that you were having panic attacks. Were these over things that were these like, I wouldn't say like early quarter life crisis, but I guess I'm trying to figure out were these, did you feel as though like your panic attacks had any, were you having panic attacks just because of like regular life growing pains, things that you aren't necessarily able to handle? Or were these infused by just reliving traumatic events of your past?
Yeah. So I would say, girl, I grew up in a kind of a crazy home. There's 7 of us. There's 7 kids. We all grew up very traditional Catholic. We were all homeschooled.
Who
And
say
I know we're all under the roof with my parents, who my mom suffers from several things, and including substance abuse. And so that was going on. And then, like, there was just a real disconnect emotionally with my dad. And I think the combination of those things and the things that happened as a result of having that kind of environment made me a very anxious. And I'm the second oldest. So my sister and I helped raise the 3 younger ones. So I was mom number 2 from the time I was like 14.
Yeah.
I had so much pressure put on me from a very young age. I did not really get to be a kid. There's a lot of stuff I feel I'm able to share about it now because of therapy and the process that I've been on. But there was so much, I think, that was impacting my mental health at such a young age that by the time I was 18, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
well. Right? Like,
Wow.
I'm not well. So there are definitely factors there that really led to, I think, a difficulty with my mental health young.
Yeah.
So,
Was there a moment where you felt like you just wanted, like you needed a new environment, but you felt stuck?
oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
definitely felt trapped for many years.
Well, what got you out? What helped you move into a direction of liberation, of emancipation?
Well, the answer to that is not a good one, but it adds to the story now. And I've jumped into mission work because that's what you do. When you want to leave your
Hey,
crazy Catholic family, you jump into Catholic mission work for 2
well,
years.
that's no, that actually is not crazy. I feel like that actually that makes sense because that's something that I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't raised Catholic, but I went to Catholic school, and I know
Mhm.
that within the Catholic school umbrella, it's like, yeah, you could do all these things, but as long as there's like your parents, or I feel like that community is more willing for you to branch out on your own and do whatever, as long as it's still within the Catholic or whatever religion within that sector of whatever it is. So, like, that seems like that would be the next step. Because then there's you
Yeah.
still you starting to feel a taste of freedom, even if it's not the freedom that you
Oof.
ultimately, yeah.
I don't know. I don't. I would say, at least the company that I worked for, I jumped from one box into another one. I jumped into another very unhealthy box, which I didn't know. At the time, I was like, I just got to leave. I think in my subconscious, I just knew I had to go somewhere. And I felt some sense of belonging, might be the wrong word. I felt a sense of like, maybe this is going to make me feel better about myself by going and doing this. The company I worked for is not a good one. I would say it was not a good experience. The things that I gathered from it, I have a tool set that I can definitely tell you I can do this and this now as a result of being a missionary for 2 years. But they were just as strict, if not more so, than living under my parents' roof. So, but I did what I knew how to do in order to get out of the situation I was in. So,
Cool. Well,
yeah.
what did you do after you left them?
Then, okay, I was based in Nashville at the time. So I was domestically based. I worked in Catholic schools and retreat centers. And I had a mental health crisis, as one does when you're. And I, 2 years, just about 2 years in, I just knew I couldn't stay there. And so I was like, I'm in Nashville. I'm just going to figure it out, which I had some real faith in myself, which I'm still amazed at to this day. So the company I was working for took all my fundraised money, and I had $300 in my bank account, and I was in Nashville without a car, and I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So I got a job at a pizza bar and like a Chicago style pizza place and bar. And I was like, I'm going to host and I'm going to work way up to serving. And I secured free housing working for this woman who owned an Airbnb down the street. I just started figuring it out. And that's when I would say I hopped out of the box and was like, whoa, the real world.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. And
This is
how
a whole
old
other
were
world.
you? How old were you at that point?
22 or 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was like almost like post college-esque.
Yeah.
But just first getting out there. Yeah. I think that's important only because I feel like not everybody no one has their life together by that age either. And I feel like that is the point in life when you really start understanding the world around you. At least people
Mhm.
here in the States. So you said that you were on certain medications just throughout your whole journey. What do you remember the first one that they put you on and what was it for?
Yes. So by the time I was 23, I was in New Orleans at that point, 23 or 24. And I actually went to a mental hospital
Mhm.
at that time because my depression was so bad and I was having suicidal ideation. And so I got on the fast track to start medication by going to the hospital and I got put on Zoloft. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I know that one.
That's a rough one. That
Yeah.
is I do not, yeah, no.
The episode before your episode, this episode here is about. Well, I did a side effects of Zoloft episode already, but I revisited it for this season because there was just so much in it. So yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
interested to hear like what your side effects were compared to
yeah.
and compare them to mine. Do you remember some of your side effects?
Well, the first one that I can think of are definitely the sexual side effects, having none, no drive whatsoever, didn't even think about it.
Yep.
Completely disconnected sexually.
Yep.
Which being a Catholic person, like was really convenient for me, but nothing, not even thinking about it. Completely numb, I would say, to just this weird apathy towards everything. And I just felt like I wasn't ever in my body, like ever. And sleep was hard too. Sleep was another one.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't remember if I had issues with sleep. I may have, and it's been a couple of years since I've been on Zoloft, but I know like when I was taking it, if I waited too long to, if I wasn't taking it regularly, like my emotions were just all over the place, high and
Mhm.
low, and it was bad. Yeah. And you started taking Zoloft because of anxiety, you said, right? Anxiety and depression.
Anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. I started with Lexapro and had an allergic reaction. Paxil had allergic reaction, and then Zoloft. I didn't have one. So they were like, sounds good. Let's put you on this.
Yeah. Do you remember the milligram or like how much of it you were taking?
I don't remember how far up I got.
That's cool. I was just curious. I know
Yeah.
like it depending, it really doesn't. I think I took the smallest dosage that you could take, but it was still very enough. It was powerful enough where I personally didn't like it. And
Yeah.
what got you off of Zoloft? Did you just stop or did you switch?
I started having the reverse effect. So it was like 2 years in, and I felt like Zoloft stopped working. I
And
find out it was like all of the emotions that I was trying to avoid or stabilize just started coming back up again, but they were almost worse. And I now know that I've had treatment resistant depression. So at the time, it was like it worked for a little while and then it just stopped working, which is odd. But I've heard can happen with Zoloft. So for me, it just didn't. I would have had to up the dosage I was on, and I was unwilling to do that at that point. Yeah.
that's something I literally just thought about, and I should have asked you earlier. But at any of these points, when you were being told you need to go on meds, did you have any backlash to it or just pushback, being like, I don't need medication, I'm not going to go on it, or just feeling apprehensive about even just going on it?
I think I was only nervous once I started trying medications because of those initial symptoms that are so difficult. But my grandmother worked in a psych facility for many years, so I was familiar with just her knowledge of using medications. And then my mom as well had been on and off medication my whole life. So I was pretty familiar with it and just felt like I just want to feel better. So I didn't really push back at all, to be honest. I just was like, I just want to feel better.
Nice. So outside of Zoloft, were there any other, you said Lexapro, you said, I think you gave me another one.
Paxil.
The duration of time that you took all of these are these all SSRIs by chance? Like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
How many years were you taking though?
So the Lexapro and the Paxil, both I had allergic reactions to almost immediately. So those I just was on for like a day or two.
Yeah.
Zoloft was just under 2 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got off of that, tried to start Cymbalta and didn't like that. Tried Effexor at one point, also didn't like that.
There's so many of them. I
There's
would
so
never.
many.
So you're taking these medications on top of going to therapy. Were you going every week? Were you going like what was your therapy schedule? If you had, did you have a set schedule for a while?
Not really. So I struggled to find a therapist that I liked in Nashville. So I didn't really go to consistent therapy then. Once I moved to New Orleans, I did find someone that I liked a little bit later. So I would have like year breaks from therapy in between each person that I saw. I had someone in New Orleans for about 2 or 3 years who specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mhm.
So my previous years with therapy, I had done a lot of just talking, basically figuring out that my life was fucked up. Do this like
Yeah.
season of therapy where you're like, oh, that's not normal. And then I graduated from that and moved into, well, what am I going to do about it therapy?
Right.
And she was great. She was virtual and I really benefited from that a lot. And I actually, the next time that I started taking medication, because I had been not taking medication for a period of time, was the start of the pandemic. I got on Wellbutrin
Wow.
and then I was on that up until 2 months ago. So I was on that for 3 years, and I paired it with Prozac a year ago and only was on that for a year. So I was on those 2 together for a year. And I'm now, as of 2 months ago, completely off of those. So, yeah.
Man. Yeah, that's a lot. Like you basically just gave me the whole alphabet of medication.
I know.
And I might need to get a list from you just to put it because I don't even think I can keep up with all that. But I'm glad that you were able to at least make it to this side to say that you've been taking all of that plus the therapy. And did you find that it helped you at all while you were on it? I mean, it seems as though you said that you were able to start processing things and
Mhm.
like explaining, like having somebody, your therapist and others around you help you configure like what actually happened for the first,
Mhm.
yeah, and how you conceptualize your life now. I guess I wonder now that you have, I guess, gotten past. I don't really say you got past it. You're just evolving into a new form of yourself. But what is the biggest lesson you think you've learned from being on medication and going to therapy?
Is this conversation speaking to you right now? Do you feel the self awareness taking over your body like a real good song? I want you to make a mental note to share the Self Aware Millennial podcast with someone you love because sharing is caring and love is not possessive. Sorry, y'all, but y'all can't have it to yourself. But for real, y'all know how good it feels when someone shares with you, whether it's their resources, their food, their wisdom, or their spouse. Okay, well, some of us. Spread the love. Decapitalize your mind and practice the gift of sharing. And want to help us reach new audiences? Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're feeling extra giving, leave a compliment. Come on, you know you want to. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah. Oh, medication for me was always seasonal when I felt like I couldn't bear certain things, I think. And therapy for me is always going to be a staple. It's always going to be something that I advocate for and that I'm going to be in. Now I've started trauma therapy with my therapist here in Atlanta, and I've been seeing her for a year.
How is
So I
that?
graduated. How is it?
Yeah. I never
It's
I don't know what trauma therapy is. I can make guesses, but how is it different from like regular therapy?
basically she noticed how disassociative I was and started asking me questions about it. And then we started basically working through some of that through basically a questionnaire that she has. And she would just note, okay, it looks like you're somewhere else, or how is your body feeling right now? And I would realize, oh, I'm having a trauma response to whatever this question is. And it helped me kind of pinpoint where some things would come up for me that I was dealing with on an everyday basis that I didn't even know. So I will say, and
You have any examples?
oh God, I
Pressure.
think no, it's so funny because the questions that she asks they don't sound threatening, but when you start getting asked these questions, your body literally goes into disassociation. That's so hard to say sometimes. It starts to disassociate. And she would ask me basically, can you remember anything from yesterday? But it's worded, I no longer, I can't remember the course of my day from yesterday. And she would say it like that. And I would be like, yes or no. I would answer yes or no.
Uh-huh.
And the more I would say yes to these questions, my body would just be like, whoa. And I would just notice and I would feel it in my body. And she
Interesting.
was, yeah. And she told me these questions literally bring your body into the response that they normally would have in these scenarios, which is so crazy. But from that space with her, I was able to uncover some very deep seated trauma and get some answers for certain things that I did not have answers for that really did lead to all of my depression and anxiety. And so therapy for me is like a no-brainer. I'm just like, that helped me uncover something that I think I was trying so hard to like cope with medication, which I totally am like, if you need medication,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
think, yeah, I'm not
Medication
against it.
is an aid. It helps you get to the point that you want to be so
Yeah.
that you don't have to be without it. That's yeah, that's I think that's how
Yeah.
I view medication as well. Like I always thought when I was taking it that I would be I would be taking it forever. I was like, oh, this is permanent. I'm gonna have this my entire life. I don't know where I got
Right.
that from. I don't know if anyone ever just not didn't tell me that medication wasn't forever. But because I think I also just have this stickler with the mental health, not the entire mental health community, but maybe like the pharmaceutical capitalism of all of it that just
Mm.
pushes doctors and every to just always have you on something so that they are making something from it. And I was just like, I don't want to be this doll or this this patient forever because I know, especially when I got to a point of being like, I can survive without it. I think I feared because the last time when I was on Zoloft and I stopped taking it and my body was just all over the place and I had to like admit myself into the hospital again. I
Mhm.
remember just being like, is this how it's always going to be when I get off of a medication? So when they put me on something else, I was just like,
Mm.
apprehensive about it because I don't want to be on something else, but I knew I had to be on something else so that I can just get my whole life together again, my body back into a regulated state, even if it meant that the medication was going to help it stay on a regulated state. I was just like, I'm gonna do this. If this starts reacting like Zoloft reacted on my body, I honestly don't know what I'm gonna do anymore. And I
Yeah.
don't remember fully what got me off the medication. 'Cause I haven't been on medication. I've just been doing talk therapy for the last I think I got off the medication earlier this year, like January.
Mm.
I was taking trileptal, which is something
Mhm.
that trileptal and Perone or Buciprone. I'm probably saying it wrong. But I was taking those 2 together for maybe a year and a half. And the effects of it wasn't as bad as Zoloft. I don't even think I had any side effects like I did with Zoloft. And it was weird because like the reason like I was gonna continue to take it, but there's that point where you have to wait for the psychiatrist to say, yo, yeah, you can we'll prescribe you for another 3 months or something like that. But my psychiatrist never did that. And I kept
Mm.
calling. I was like, what's going on, and I think it had something else to do with, like, my insurance, and things just got really muddy, and I wasn't as steadfast on following up because I just got frustrated, and then all of a sudden,
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, I haven't been on it for the last 3 months, and I feel fine." And so I was like, "Oh, well, I feel
Mm.
fine.
Yeah.
Let's see how long this will keep going." And
Yeah.
I was still doing talk therapy at the time, and so it wasn't like I was just really staying in tune with my body, and if anything were to have arose, I was just using my usual coping mechanisms that I learned while I was still on medication to utilize.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so after a while, it was like, "Okay, I think I can do this." And I've been doing it ever since, and I guess now it's been around 10 months since I've last been on medication, and I don't wanna go back. I also feel more like myself now than I did
Mhm.
at any of the times I was taking medication ever. So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Feeling more like myself, which is a little scary sometimes if you're someone who is a big feeler. You're like, "Oh, I have all this
Yeah.
underneath here."
Mhm.
But I almost would rather navigate that than try and navigate, I think, the apathy that I would experience from medication, which again, I needed in certain seasons of life, so I don't condemn it, but just this season now feels like, yeah, there's so many more benefits with being in talk therapy and other methods of healing that just resonate with me so much more.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do right now, what I like to do for this next segment is we're going to have a couple of questions and conversations about, we're going to go a little further into your journey with just not being on medication, but we're going to take it over to Patreon right quick, just so that everybody on Patreon can give us a little bit more love. I realize there's some questions on here that I have not asked that I really would like to know more about in terms of just because I'm always interested in hearing about people's coping skills and how they cope with like big, heavy things. Because everybody has to cope differently depending on the trauma that they've endured. So, what are your like top 3 coping skills that you find have been effective in your healing journey and your overall mental wellness?
This always changes.
Yes.
This always fluctuates. And I'm trying to think right now, meditation for me is a no-brainer. That's always something I feel like I'm always going to have to do. So that's definitely number 1. Number 2 is having a pet.
An emotional support animal.
An emotional support animal. To lose my cat is registered as an emotional support animal. That's been a huge coping tool for me, is just having a pet in the house. And then also, I've gone through fluctuations in this for years, but some form of physical movement, which I know is also such a generic answer, but
It's helpful. Like it really
yeah.
does help, even if it's not to like the extent of that. I think a lot of people think that it'll help, but
Mhm.
it's still like your body has to keep moving. The world moves, the
Yeah.
universe moves, like you have to move too.
Mhm.
It all makes sense if you really think about it in the simplest terms. So yeah,
Definitely.
physical movement that makes sense. You were not crazy for thinking that, and it's not just a generic answer. Does help as I sit here, you know, because lately I'll say this because I've been the last couple of years, I've been sitting more because I'm editing and I am just, there's just things I have to do now where I'm just sitting at a computer, and in my 9 to 5, I do a lot of sitting or just not moving around very much because a lot of the things I do are very static. So I have to make a point like every single day to have some type of physical movement. Otherwise, I'm not going to do anything all day. And even though I feel like I do more than I feel most people in terms of movement daily, but it's still not enough because I sit for most of the day. So
Right.
I'm trying to work through my schedule where I can find more moments to move around because I do most
Mhm.
of my movement in the mornings when I wake up, and then I sit all day. So I
Yeah.
wanna find more, like, in between, like, during the day, or maybe, I don't know, like, I know the people I have one of the desks now where it, like, goes up and down. What do you call it? Standing desk? Where I wanna get, like, one of
Yeah.
those little treadmills you can put underneath the desk.
Yeah. Oh, wait, yes. I've seen those.
I feel like I'm in that time of my life where Imma probably need that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that
That's a good idea.
I mean, it's something. It's not the best, it's not the most ideal, but it's still better than just sitting or standing for hours and
Mhm.
hours on end. This is a question that I want to ask all of my guests, just because at the beginning of this season, I started off the season talking about how I benefited a lot from detoxing from social media and just like taking regular breaks and resting a lot. I've read Rest is Resistance by the founder of the nap industry, Trisha Hersey. And I'm always just curious if my guests also detox from social media and what that looks like for them. So I'm asking you, what does social media detox look like for you? Have you done it?
Honestly, yes. In order for me to do that, I have to delete the app.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's what I do. When I feel like it's just been too much, I'll just delete the app. And
And
I'm
that does
actually
it for
due for
you.
that. Yeah, I'm actually due, I think. Honestly, it's every few months I'm like, "Ooh, I just need a little bit of a break. But because I feel I've been pretty present on there recently because I'm trying to get my business stuff built up. It's just taken so much time. So that's always hard to navigate, which I'm sure you go through that as well, keeping up with
Every
a
damn
platform.
day. Every damn day.
Yeah.
I've started to forgive myself for just a lack of posting and everything because I know work is still being done. It's just not being seen every day on social media, which is fine because I always just think about how people functioned pre social media. Like, I'm like, oh, we can still use all of these other tools that have been around for centuries on centuries in order to build up a business, a group, whatever it is. And so
Hmm.
I've been really trying to hone in on those means of promotion for the podcast, for my production company and everything. Cause those are honestly, I mean, they're just as taxing, but it's something about it's more organic and it's more personable with people versus sending a DM versus sending a letter to somebody in the mail.
Right. Completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just more intention and more, I don't know. I would feel so honored to have I need to start I need not start, but I want a pen pal. I feel like it was so fun to have a pen pal again and then you send it off and you have to wait however many days for the pen pal to send something back. There's just something
Yeah.
about having to wait for things
Yeah.
and not be instant. I was just at a wedding
Mhm.
I was at a wedding this weekend and one of the not party favors, but like just something that they had at everyone's disposal was disposable cameras that you could take
Mhm.
pictures like the throughout the ceremony, throughout whatever you want to take it. But the thing was that like, you took the pictures. You couldn't see what it looked like. So you don't know until they go and develop all of the disposable cameras, like what they're going to look like.
Right.
And it just keeps you more in the moment. So I don't know.
It does.
I've been trying to hone in on that again, but like through the podcast. And because I started
Yeah.
this during COVID, it was really hard because like it was all virtual like we are right now. And
Mhm.
everything had to be promoted virtually because that's all we had. So I am now in a place with the podcast where I am trying to now transition to being more like just a regular business, not brick and mortar. I don't know why brick and mortar was in my head because think of podcast had a brick and mortar. It'd be nice,
Mhm.
but we're not there yet. But there's just something about having in-person events. Like even when I did the live show, I was just like, this feels really good to just have people in person, like having like reactions from people real time, not like weeks and weeks later after they finally listen to the episode. It's just a different vibe, a different experience. And I feel like I've been craving that so much lately. Sorry, I went
Yeah.
on a whole tangent about that, but at least it
No,
was
it's true. Yeah.
um what are some things that you are doing? I know we were talking about social media detoxing, but do you have any practices outside of social media detoxing that you would, I guess, that you would implement when you feel like you want to slow down? Like you feel like your body is just in a rushed state at all times outside of meditation?
Yeah. I think shutting down electronics in general or purposely leaving my phone at home when I like go out with my partner or something, or we go for a walk, or I'm just like, I just need to get away from this tiny ass device that keeps me so on all the time. One practice I have and that I will do for the rest of my existence having a phone is it's always on mute. I don't get dings for texts. I don't get a phone ring.
Mhm.
And that keeps me in the moment when I do have my phone and I'm out because I just never think to check it, which is great, actually. Yeah.
I did that too.
Mhm.
I did that. That's when so you know how like when we were first we all had social media and like the notifications and the dings for every time we had a notification. People still have that.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but
I
like
know.
after I think one day, I don't know if I was just probably reading some sort of social media detox article at some point. That was probably the biggest game changer, when I removed all of my notifications from all the social media networks
Mm-hmm.
and text messages, like you said, like Bing and all of that, because I didn't realize you didn't need to have a sound for when someone sends you a text message.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, it's so nice when that's off.
yeah. And then you don't even really feel bad. I mean, there's some people that like want to hear from you right then and there, but you don't feel bad about it because you're just seeing it. And if they get upset, like that's on them, that's more on the lines
Mm-hmm.
of maybe how their phone is set up. Everybody, if you're listening, I recommend, if you have not done that yet, just turn off all of your notifications for all of your social media and your like main notifications that you get during the day. Just turn them off. You can do that right in your settings. So the last couple of questions, well, not a couple, I think I actually asked most of them. Okay, yeah, we're in our closing thoughts right now. This is for the listeners. This is strictly for the listeners. I want us to give some advice for the listeners who are tired of taking medications and want alternatives to nurse their mental health. Because I know I was at that point at one point where I was just like, I don't know if I can't do this anymore, but I don't know what to do. You're being told from so many different angles that therapy and taking medication is the only way, that you can never survive without it. But like, we've been surviving without medications for years and years on end. We just didn't necessarily have diagnoses for them. And yeah, so do you have any advice for folks or any alternatives that have worked for you?
Yeah, I definitely think that doing research, I know that sounds silly maybe, but doing research and seeing what else is out there is super important. Podcasts, super great resource. If I wanted to figure out something with my mental health too, I would just search on Spotify or whatever, and I would just be like, mental health. And I would legitimately, sometimes to this day, still do it. If I need more information, I would just get your hands on as many alternatives as possible because there's so much out there and there are things available. I think that what is given to us, like you were saying, is pretty cut and dry. And there's just a world of other options. And I think it's just opening yourself up and reading about something. Or if you're not in the mood to read, listen to something while you're on your way to work, get other people's perspectives. And that's how I have found alternatives myself. And we have so much access to knowledge now. You're going to find something that resonates with you or that you can try.
Funnily enough, I haven't gone on Spotify or any of the podcast streaming services to search like strictly mental health things. I've looked up other things. I know when I was, well, we're not going to get into that. We'll go into that at another point. But I'm gonna stay on subject to this. But I've stumbled upon very valuable information, including like narcissism, and because I had always heard about narcissism, for example,
hmm
and didn't really necessarily know what it meant
hmm
until just randomly one day. I guess it just came up on my Spotify, and I was like, check this out. And then I just like dove into this huge world of realizing there were so many instances within my life, close people that like that I've known my entire life, who are on the textbook definition narcissist. I just never had the name for it until then. So not that narcissism has anything to do with medication. Maybe it does, because I feel like most narcissists aren't going to take medication. See how I try to go off track?
You're just like taking little like side roads. They all lead back to the same place.
Yeah,
Yeah, it all makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I might try doing that then. I might just, because I'm always, not that I feel like I need alternatives at the moment, but as I was saying earlier, I've definitely been at a point in my life where I knew that I didn't need to take medication anymore. but I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
how I could maintain my mental wellness without it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was stuck. I felt like I had been in therapy since 2012, and I'm still in therapy, but I'm not taking the medication anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess, okay, I have one more question for both of us. Do you remember do you remember a time within the last couple of months or whenever you stopped taking medication where you felt like you were going to be okay? Or was there a lull in like maybe your therapy journey with your therapist or whatever, where it was just like maybe you are now getting too much therapy. There's nothing happening right now. And you know that you don't necessarily need as much. Because obviously, yeah, therapy happens in seasons. Like you may need it more during a certain
Mm-hmm.
part of your life than others. But was there a point within your journey where you're like, okay, I think I can take my foot off the gas a little bit?
With therapy, I'm gonna be honest and say no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that weekly or bi-weekly appointment where I know whatever has gone on the past week or two, I have a place for it,
Mhm.
offers me some sense of stability that I think I just do really well with. My personality, I think, needs it.
Yeah.
If there's a point when I get to that and I'm like, I don't need it as much, then I'll be like, interesting, because I feel like I'm always going to just need some level of consistency, even if it's just to shoot the shit about my week and something that was annoying. I'm like, I like having my therapist there, knowing that she's going to be there in 2 weeks and that I can just talk about whatever. I don't
Right.
know. I
Okay.
think there's something really great about that for me.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's trying to give a good example of, especially for, I mean, I have to remember there's people that listen to this podcast that have never even been to therapy, so they don't even understand the importance that it can be within your life if you utilize it in that way. But I think for me, I treat therapy as just a moment where I can analyze myself in a non-judgmental space, which is
Hmm.
hard when you could do that with friends, but it's nice to have somebody, a third party, or I don't know if you want to call your therapist a third party, but somebody who is literally there to help you out for a month. Not a month, sorry. Or
Yeah.
per week, or however long you agreed to schedule your therapy. For me, I was doing it for like once a week, every week at the
Hmm.
same time, usually. But I got to a point where I didn't need to take it. I didn't need to go to therapy anymore. I think what kind of sealed the deal for me to be like, okay, I think I could let up a little bit was just feeling like I'm coming into therapy and I don't have nothing to talk about. Everything's fine. I
Hmm.
don't really feel like talking about things like I feel like I've covered all angles here. And
Hmm.
therapist is just, well, it's okay if you don't have anything to talk about. We can cut this short. And I was like, okay.
Wow. Yeah.
But I had those moments. I was starting to have those moments, even within like my weekly sessions. Like I made like nothing was going on. Like even just in my everyday life, like everything just felt pretty stable. My body felt stable. I felt
Mhm.
like I really just didn't have anything to talk about. And I know that obviously changed like as the weeks went on, but there's just certain times where I'm just like, I'm good. I know we scheduled this, but I was
Yeah.
good. And if you ever get to that point, good for you. Listeners, if that ever happens to you, that's great. I'm sure for the therapist, they're like, I don't actually know what they're thinking. Some of them might be sad that they don't like, or maybe some of them are happy. They can go do other things for however long they're supposed to
Mhm.
have you in their block of time. So yeah, I think that's our advice. I don't know if that was really advice or anything, but I hope it's helpful for everybody listening to this on their upcoming journeys within their self awareness, their healing, within meds, within therapy, or whatever you are utilizing to keep your mental wellness in check. we are partnering with NOLA Black Mental Health Matters here in New Orleans. Or I've been in talks with them about getting more resources out to our listeners, especially the ones that are here within the city, because Black Mental Health Matters has a directory of over, I think it's probably around 70 Black mental health care professionals within the greater New Orleans area that take all kinds of insurance, and they do pro bono and all kinds of stuff. So I'll link that in the notes for anybody that may need a therapist. And if I find any alternatives to therapy, I will let y'all know in the show descriptions as well. But yeah, anyway, otherwise, Asia, if you would like to give everyone your socials, you are more than welcome to at this moment.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and give y'all my tarot reading one. That's probably the best way to reach me because I also am a tarot reader.
We love tarot readers.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about it. It's a.r.reading for my Instagram. And yeah, just shoot me a DM. I'm super responsive. Would love to, just be another little shining light in the mental health world that's just, hey, I've also been here. So always happy to support and chat and be available. So that's a good place to reach me at.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much for just having this conversation on here and on Patreon. Y'all, I'll be honest, I don't know when the Patreon episode is going to be coming out, but y'all will know and I will let you know as best as I can. First, and also, by the way, Patreon, y'all, Patreon is popping lately. So if you want to join and support the show, you can support us as low as $1 a month. Yeah, I'm really trying to cater to the times right now, especially with all of us, especially even myself. Like $1 a month will get you in, and even being able to listen to this bonus episode that I have with Asia. But also, as I said earlier, we have now the Self-Aware Millennial live shows that will be up. We're still waiting on the third one. Actually, we're still waiting. I'm still waiting because it's all me that is editing it. So I get to it when I get to it. But yeah, y'all, check out the Patreon. That's how we are able to keep this podcast going. And if y'all want more of these conversations, it's there, www.patreon.com/the-self-aware-millennial. Other than that, I would say y'all can follow the Self-Aware Millennial on Instagram, but we're not necessarily posting all the time. What you should do is join our mailing list, because that is where you're going to be getting majority of the updates for our upcoming episodes. Speaking of Patreon, at the end of this episode, you'll be listening to a little tidbit of a conversation that we had on one of the last Self-Aware Millennial live shows. I think I'm going to do the one with Dylan, and I hope that y'all enjoy that. But otherwise, I will see y'all next time for the next episode of the Self-Aware Millennial. Thank you again, Asia. We loved having you. And I hope that y'all have a good rest of your day.
Any tips on how to effectively communicate your boundaries?
I think there is so much power in taking a second. That's really my only advice. And that's both power in the sense that, if you want to talk about perception and posturing, you're in control of your space, and of yourself. And so that's you it's you simultaneously taking control by letting yourself have some time and some space. But also just gives you a second to think and to not say something that you don't mean, or to say something impulsive, which isn't to say that, to censor yourself, but just boundaries can be tricky, and I think they merit thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
And time and space are what provide thoughtfulness.
Yeah. And I think in terms of that thoughtfulness is also understanding, especially if you know the person that you have to set the boundary for, knowing how it sucks, but knowing how to, figuring out how they will receive it. Yes. In the ways that you, if you're in a heightened state,
where you know the boundary has to be set right then and there, but like still finding grace to explain that to them. Sorry, I'm gonna go back to what you said about just, I think in my own words, setting boundaries is, the thoughtfulness of it comes with taking a break or taking a little step, like for me, and I think, I'm thinking of boundaries and arguments all in the same, it's all getting really mushy right now, but I always find that when you are in that heightened state, it is good to find a way to regulate. Now, for everybody that's different. Some people have to step into the other room for a hot second. Some people need to drink some water. Some people may just need to take a couple of breaths. Some people need to go take a drive. Not everybody knows what's best for them. And I think with therapy, they teach you different ways for them to help you figure out like what works best for you, especially in like a quick situation where like you need to regulate yourself so that you can still have a productive conversation. Where was I? I don't even remember what I was saying.
Also, I think practice can be beneficial. Yes. So this idea that, like the reason we lash out is because there are patterns that we have been doing over and over again, and so we get this heightened fight or flight state, and so our body does whatever the thing we're used to doing. And so taking the initiative to practice how you respond, even though it seems kind of silly, but practicing, how to say, give me 1 second, right? Just give me 1 second, into a mirror for however many times, and really getting the motion of doing that built into your brain, so that when there is that fight or flight, that triggering moment, you have more easier access